When we think about the book of Shmot, the book of names, or as it's called in the English, I don't know, remember if it's from the Latin, probably Exodus, we think, of course, of the Jewish people's um, exile in Egypt, and we think about Pesach story and our leaving of Egypt. But of course, the story of Shmot, that's only half of the story of Shmot. The other half of the story of Shmot is generally, not completely, but a lot begins in the beginning of this week's Parsha with the building of a Mishkan. The Ramban, Nachmanides, for example, based upon that, refers to the book of Shmot as Sefer Galut v'Geula, the book of exile and redemption. Now, you might say the Jews don't make it to Israel. What is the redemption? But for the Ramban, for Nachmanides, who was a mystic, it's all about connection with God, closeness to God, what some of the mystics might call unio mystica. And when you are in galut, when you're in exile, and you have an Egyptian master who's controlling you, then you are in galut, you are in exile. So you're geographically in exile, but more importantly for him, you're spiritually in exile. When you have a Mishkan that's built, Allah, the a moment of Har Sinai from 2 weeks ago, where God's Shekhinah, you hear the words together, Mishkan and Shekhinah, they come from the same root, Shachain, a neighbor, Shochain, to dwell next to you. The Mishkan is the portable Sinai experience continuing, then you are no longer in the diaspora, as it were, personally, even if you are technically not in the land of Israel. So this is Sefer Galut v'Geula, and that Geula, that redemption, in a sense, you could say it starts already at Har Sinai. You could say it starts already with the Eser Makot and the Jews going out, but the closeness to God, Karbanot, talk a lot about Karbanot in Judaism. It's translated as sacrifices, but the word in Hebrew is related to the word karov. It's from the shorish, the word karov, which means to come close. It's about coming close to God. Bringing a karban is not about slaughtering the animal. It's about the connection, coming close to God. Physically, you could say, by going to the Mishkan, going to the tabernacle, or going to the Beit HaMikdash in Jerusalem, but more importantly, coming close to God, not only in geographic, again, proximity, but in some sort of, you want to call it emotional, social, you want to call it whatever, however you want to, spiritual, whatever word you want to use that works for you, it doesn't matter. So Parshat Truma begins with the command from God to Moshe to take a gift from all of the people, from all of the Jews, Asher Yidvenu Libo, everyone's heart who is so moved, Tikhu et Terumati. There are two types of taxes, if you were. There are the obligatory taxes. This is not a comment about the American tax system. And then there is sort of the voluntary tax. Anybody, we don't want you to give to the Mishkan if you don't feel that that's something you believe in, is what God tells Moshe here, right? It's in Pasuk Bet. Kol ish asher yidbenu libo. Anybody whose heart is so moved, who feels that sense of spirit, and what can you take? Well, you can take gold, you can take silver, you can take copper, you could take all sorts of different yarns, fine linen, you could take different skins of animals and oils and spices, different types of stones. And then in verse 8, why? V'yasu li mikdash, you shall make for me a sanctuary, from the word kadosh, holy, separate. V'shachanti bitocham, and then I will dwell amongst you. This is the important notion here, is that the Jews, God is saying, again, Mishkan is from the same word as Shekhinah. The same word, the Shekhinah, is understood as the lowest part of God, whatever that means, the Godhead. It's the part that's most accessible, the part that's closest to us. It's the part that is the Shachain, is the part that is our neighbor, who lives in the Shchunah, who lives in our neighborhood. I know it sounds like Mr. Rogers now, which would be great if I would be compared to Mr. Rogers. I'd be honored. So here the Jews go, we're building a temple. And up to this point, if we think about it, the Jews experienced God with plagues and miracles and all sorts of amazing, incredible things. But here we're shifting from the wonders and the miracles to God's presence, right? Redemption is not complete when God defeats your enemies. It's complete when God can dwell amongst you. The Mishkan is teaching that holiness is not about those fancy, I don't want to call them superficial, but you understand what I mean. Those gigantic moments, the dramatic moments. But it's about creating a space for God in your ordinary, ongoing life. And then, hence again, the words that I'm using, vishachanti, the Mishkan is right. You're close to God. Right? You associate with God. We think of God doing the big things, but it's more important in Judaism to place God in your routine. The idea of a bracha, for example. What's a bracha? Bracha is I'm eating food, but I'm not just eating food. I have the moment to make this eating of food a recognition of the creator of the world, a recognition of where my place is, a recognition. Bracha is all about that kavanah of taking any sort of act, any sort of moment and infuse something greater into it. And so God here is the Shekhinah. Now, one of the interesting questions regarding the let's talk something else, and we'll come back there. Something that's important here, and this is we could compare it to a certain wing on a house at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. The People's House, as some called it in the past, which is less the People's House because it had a whole wing which was knocked down this last time I can check. But don't worry, average taxpayer, you don't have to pay for it, we're told, which may be true, maybe not true. You never know what's true and what's not true. The Google will pay for it, and Amazon will pay for it, and Microsoft will pay for it, and this person's foundation and that person's foundation. And don't think ever that they may get better tax rates or something. That is not the way that Judaism operates. Me'et kol ish asher yidbenu libo tikhu et trumati. It is coming. The Mishkan is funded by voluntary gifts from anyone and everyone. Holiness is not for the priest. Holiness is not for the king. Holiness is not for the 1%. It's built by the entire community. The Mishkan becomes sacred because everyone has a stake in it. Right? There are no taxes, there's no coercion, there's no hierarchy. This is something that's beautiful, and it's something that we spoke about, and something that, in a sense, is sad when we think of traditional Orthodox Judaism today, and people complain about the men and the women are separate, and the men have the power, and those are very, very legitimate and good claims. But Judaism, at its core, has this sense of egalitarianism. Whether I don't want to talk about egalitarianism in terms of against genders for now. Can leave that for a different time. It's not for our daily Tanakh class. But again, it comes back to Paro and Moshe, back a few parshiot ago. Who's going to go with you to worship our gods? With our men and our women, with the young and the old. Everybody, Chag Hashem Lanu, it's for all of us to go. There's not a certain segment who owns more of this. I had a story like this. I had a close family friend named Paul Levy. Paul Levy and his wife, Ruth Levy. Ruth was in Theresienstadt. I don't remember exactly. Paul, in the Holocaust, they were our neighbors. They lived below us when we were growing up in Washington Heights. And Paul used to tell me the story of his shul, which is no longer in existence anymore. Sharei Tikva was a Yekka shul in Washington Heights. And he used to tell me about it, how it was built by Holocaust survivors and others in whatever it was, 1947, 1952, one of these German Jewish shuls in Washington Heights. And what he used to say is that everybody contributed. And he was comparing it to a shul in Teaneck that was being built by one guy, and God bless that man, Norman Stark. He built a shul, basically told nobody else that they had to contribute. And I say, God bless him, because he left Teaneck. He built the shul, and he didn't tell them what to do. He moved out. He lives in Israel now most of the time. Wonderful Baltzucker, wonderful guy. But Paul was telling me, I remember about how when they built the shul with Sharei Tikva, and everybody contributed. And some people could contribute more, and some people could contribute less, and nobody's looked down upon. And it belonged to all of them. And they felt that way. They felt a sense of ownership. It wasn't this person. God bless the person who gives $5 million. But that person does not own the shul more than the person who gives $500 or maybe even $50. And that's what's being said here. And that's part of why we have, in my opinion, this long list. You give what you can give. Some people have gold. Some people have, and again, I gave monetary amounts, but some people have gold, and some people have fine wool and fine linen. And we know that, of course, in terms of people's talents. Here we have a list of materials, but we know that with people's talents. Some people can help by doing incredible design work, and other people can do by doing great budgetary work to see how we can make the numbers work. And some people, you know what their talent is? Their talent is babysitting, which might be harder than the first two, and they can watch the kids while everybody else has that meeting. Or everybody can contribute that part. That is what this Mishkan is about. Everybody give with a giving heart, and also give what you can. So here we have a list of precious items, but what you can give is the important part. And that's a very, very important part of the building of the Mishkan. We're only early in the parsha, but the Haftorah is going to be about the building of the Beit HaMikdash, obviously, by Shlomo. And it's a very different type of building. It's a building that is commanded by Shlomo. It is Shlomo's building. Over and over again in the speech he's going to give, he's going to talk about Habayit Hazeh Asher Baniti, the house that I built. Now, if I was one of the people who was up there in the Lebanon, cutting down trees and moving them and getting working my butt off, I would be thinking, Habayit Hazeh Asher Baniti, the house that I built. You sat in your palace and you told us what to do with your 1,000 wives and your many sacrifices. That's not the way this Mishkan is constructed. And that becomes, we studied it when we studied the Tanakh class, the Beit HaMikdash becomes difficult because of the taxes that Shlomo imposes for the great building projects, and that his son doesn't get rid of those building, but that doesn't get rid of the taxes. So right there was, you had to tax them. Here, what is being said? This is voluntary. Let's compare it for a moment to Egypt. The Jews did a lot of building in Egypt. They did a lot of construction work, but there was no nedivat lev. There was nobody who wanted to do that. It wasn't on their own time. It wasn't their own contribution. It wasn't what they were wanting to do. They were forced into doing it. Here, there's no force. There's no coercion. Everybody give and contribute what you can. And you give and contribute what you can, hopefully it will be successful. It's interesting to think about their right shuls. Classically, we talked about just the shuls for a second always had dues. One of the new movements, that people talk about is we're not going to assign dues. And for some places it's work. They don't assign dues. You don't have to pay your dues, but the people can give whatever contributions they want, and maybe it inspires people to feel that they have to give more. And it's been a model that's worked in certain places. I can't say that it works forever. With the Mishkan, it works in a tremendous way, where later on, I believe it's in Parshat Vayakel, Moshe has to tell the Jewish community, you've given enough. You can stop giving. We have more than enough. You could say that's a fundraiser's dream, but then I guess they're out of a job. So I don't know if it's their dream or not, but that is the way that this is done. This is God's house, but more than God's house, it is the people's house. Everybody has a stake in it. Nobody is coerced. Give what you can. So for some people, it's going to be these materials. For other people, it's going to be perhaps the talents that they have, the stitching work, the building work, whatever it is. And that is the sense of why the Mishkan is such a beautiful project. And that's why God can dwell amongst it, because everybody's doing it voluntarily and everybody has a stake in it. And thus we come back to the verse, V'yasuli mikdash v'shachanti bitocham. Make for me a temple, a sanctuary, and I will dwell amongst you, amongst all of you, not amongst some of you. And that's the beauty of this project. It's not easy to replicate, but it stands as an ideal, and we'll talk more about it as an ideal structure and some of the important points about it as we continue throughout our learning of Parshat Terumah this week.